Hi, my name is John Gilly. My education is a PhD in molecular biology. I've spent over 35 years in drug and vaccine development. What I'm going to do is to talk a little bit about the COVID-19 vaccines that have been developed and are now available in the United States and elsewhere. 3 different types of coronavirus vaccines are developed. That little beastly looking thing is actually a representation of the coronavirus itself. The spikes that you see on top of that are called the spike protein. Prior to COVID-19, the research community had 2 previous examples to learn a lot about coronaviruses and how they infect human beings. The first was in 2002. It was called SARS. It was in South Asia, and it was mainly transmitted between animals and humans. It was not a very good virus to go from human to human. So it wasn't a pandemic, but what it did was help us understand what is this virus, how is it structured, and how does it actually infect cells, and how does it cause disease. For about 5 years later, there was another coronavirus infection called MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, and that was transmitted between camels and human beings in Saudi Arabia. It was deadly, but it was very limited, again, because it didn't transmit from person to person. But all of that research really told us a tremendous amount about coronaviruses and prepared us for what happened in 2019. So we learned that that spike protein is what attaches to our cells to get the virus inside and cause the infection. So if we can block that, either by a vaccine or other treatment, we can prevent that infection from being deadly or even causing disease. The top area, number 1, is where you traditionally just make that protein again, and you prepare a vaccine associated with that, and you dose that. There are vaccines that are currently in development using that approach. The 2 main vaccines that we've talked about in the United States are number 2, and that is a viral vector vaccine. That is the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccine. That uses a common cold virus that infects very easily, but it carries the gene for that spike protein, such that when it infects our cells, it actually turns our cells into little factories where we make that own spike protein. Our body recognizes it as foreign, and we build an immune response to it. The third avenue is mRNA, and that is also carrying the gene for that spike protein. That's the Moderna and the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines that are available in the United States. That is another way of changing genetic information into our cells that then produces that spike protein, and we can build immunity to it. The next slide shows a little bit of molecular biology, and that is DNA, which contains the gene, is transcribed into mRNA, the message, that then produces protein. And it is the proteins that do the work. This is the standard for how all of our cells work. So we're using that machinery in order to make these vaccines. Now, the viral vector vaccines were first developed in the 1990s. They've been around for a very long time and have been tested even in human beings in cancer and a broad range of other applications. It never was used widely for emerging diseases because traditional approaches tended to work, and we never really invested a tremendous amount of money to research vaccines for emerging diseases. The J&J approach, using that viral vector approach, was demonstrated to be extremely effective in Ebola control in 2014, 2015. So it was demonstrated that that technology produced an efficacious vaccine. The mRNA approaches were first reported using that technology in 1990, over 30 years ago. And that again shows that by taking a genetic message, you can find a way to change cells, both in culture and in animals, and now in people, to make a protein that you want to have made. So when we talk about how quickly things really moved, it was based on huge amounts of investment in technology that occurred 30 years ago that prepared us to this point, coupled with that knowledge of doing the research on coronaviruses, such that we were able to take that technology. In January of 2020, a Chinese researcher was able to isolate COVID-19, did a gene sequence for the entire virus, and published that around the world. And it was that information that Moderna and J&J and others took right away and started developing their vaccine. The next slide just shows you those 4 vaccines that we've been talking about. 2 are mRNA that require 2 injections, and the reason why it's 2 injections is that's the basis for the clinical trials. You can only claim what works by what you prove in clinical study. And through the previous work that they did, they showed that 1 dose may be partially effective, but 2 doses really helped fully provide effective protection. And that's where we call the first dose is a priming dose. It alerts your immune system to something that would be foreign. And the following dose is a booster dose. And that's where we look to develop a memory response such that if you see the virus and are exposed to it in the future, you'll be able to mount another booster response that helps protect you. The J&J vaccine, because they tried to move so quickly, especially in Ebola, they were able to demonstrate that a single shot would provide sufficient protection, especially 100% protection against death and hospitalization, which all of these vaccines have been shown to do that. The last thing I wanted to show was the number and the broad range of these clinical trials that have been done. Tens of thousands of individuals volunteered for these clinical trials, one of which is a parishioner here at St. James. Because they enrolled so quickly and because the disease was so prevalent, they were able to provide evidence that these vaccines not only were sufficiently protective, but they were able to understand what the major safety issues could be. Now, through broad immunization programs, we've identified rare but very serious side effects which could be or possibly are associated with the vaccines. The authorities in the United States are being very cautious to try to understand what the connections might be and whether there are any individuals that might be at higher risk of these very rare but very serious side effects. One additional question that I had received was those individuals who received vaccines, for example, the J&J vaccine or the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine, and then subsequently hear about or read about those serious but rare adverse effects. The thing that I would say is to contact their doctor or talk to their medical professional. If they feel ill or feel seriously ill, they should seek medical attention right away. If individuals don't have a personal doctor, then I would suggest that they contact the county health authorities or the state health authorities, which are set up to be able to respond and to receive inquiries about vaccines or about COVID-19. For me personally, if a vaccine has been authorized for use by the US FDA and recommended for use for my age group and my health condition by the CDC, I would follow their guidance. And if I had any second concerns or second questions, I would consult my physician. There are a number of variants in the UK, in Brazil, in South Africa, and other places. And what you're seeing is evolution in real time. We do know now that there are mutations and other things that happen at that gene level that causes things to change, including structures of virus. The second thing we learn is that there's a pressure against those changes. And if there is a broad range of population that is immune against a certain virus type, those changes that find a way to potentially escape that may become more and more effective as viruses to cause infection. So they're looking at this and they're looking to see if there's sufficient cross protection that is provided through the existing vaccines, that even if it doesn't prevent infection, those infections would only be mild, and those infections would not cause severe disease and death. We all have to really stay tuned. There is talk about whether booster shots are needed or not, but we certainly understand that the CDC and the FDA are evaluating all of these to understand, are they effective, are they necessary, and are they safe?